It started on a night when the world should have been asleep. No storms. No clouds. Just a quiet darkness stretching over cities and deserts and oceans like a blanket that had finally settled down after a long day. And then, the sky changed. At first, people thought it was an aurora, those northern lights that drift like ribbons of color. But this wasn't green or blue or even natural. It was ash-colored, a pale, sickly gray that pulsed like veins spreading across the heavens. It didn't shine. It didn't glow. It throbbed. A heartbeat in the sky. Dogs began barking first, panicked, confused, pulling at their leashes as if something above them was staring back. Birds flew in chaotic spirals, crashing into windows and power lines. Cats arched their backs and hissed at what looked like empty air. The animals knew. Hours later, scientists appeared on the news calling it a dust anomaly, some strange atmospheric reflection. But while they spoke, the cameras picked up something their eyes didn't see. Behind them, the sky rippled. Like something massive was moving behind it. As if the sky were only a thin sheet, and something ancient pressed its palm against it from the other side. People watching at home felt their stomachs twist. Some swore they saw a face form in the ashlight. Others said they heard whispers. But for those standing outside, watching the gray pulse spread wider and wider across the stars, the horror was much simpler. They realized the light wasn't shining down. It was shining through. As though it came from deep space. Far beyond the stars. From a place where no human should ever look. Then the first scream came. A man in Arizona pointed upward, trembling violently, his voice cracking as he cried that something was writing messages in the sky. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed, bleeding from his nose. Across the world, others followed. People fainted, vomited, and screamed while staring up at the ash-colored heavens. Some tried to claw out their eyes. And the whispers grew stronger. Not like voices carried by the wind. But like words forming inside the mind. Ancient syllables. A language no human throat could shape. And every person who heard it understood only one thing. It wasn't speaking to us. It was warning its own kind. Calling them. Guiding them. Waking them. And somewhere, beneath the earth, something answered. A low, distant rumble rolled through the soil. Too long to be thunder. Too deep to be machinery. Too alive to be imagination. The omen had appeared. And the world, without realizing it, had just witnessed the first sign. That the ash gods were beginning to rise. By the second night, the sky was no longer ash-gray. It had turned blank. Colorless. Silent. Like a canvas wiped clean by a hand too large to belong to anything human. And beneath that empty sky, people began to notice something wrong. Not a sound at first. Not a scream. But a silence so deep it felt like the world was holding its breath. Then the forgetting began. It started in a small town in the Midwest, a nice place, the kind of place with a gas station, a church, and a long, straight road leading into nothing. The people there woke up, walked outside, and froze. The welcome sign at the edge of town was blank. No name. No letters. Just a smooth metal plate as if the town had never been called anything at all. Then the businesses followed. The diner, the motel, even the water tower. Every sign, every street name, every carved memorial stone. The writing had vanished overnight. People tried to speak the town's name. But their throats tightened. Their minds blanked. All they could say was, "I'm from there." They pointed instead of speaking. By noon, 3 more cities across the world reported the same phenomenon. By evening, 14. By midnight, over 30. Entire cities losing their names like memories dissolving underwater. But the worst part wasn't the missing letters. It was the people. Residents began forgetting their addresses, their landmarks, their own history. When asked where they were from, many stood quietly, eyes hollow, fingers trembling, as if they were trying to grab something slipping away in the dark. Even major cities, ones everyone in the world knows, woke up with blank signboards and confused citizens staring at intersections they could no longer identify. The news networks tried to explain it as vandalism, mass hysteria, chemical exposure. But the cameras caught what the anchors tried to hide. A faint pattern swirling above the nameless cities. The same ash-colored pulse that had first appeared in the sky. But now it moved with purpose. Flowing like smoke, drifting like a mind searching for something lost. And then came the message. Not in words. Not on screens. But inside the heads of every person watching the sky. The world that knows itself cannot be unmade. A warning? A prophecy? A threat? No one knew. But historians, linguists, priests, and scientists all agreed on one terrifying point. Something ancient was erasing identity. Wiping names. Wiping meaning. Wiping the world clean, city by city, memory by memory. As if preparing the earth for something older. To claim it. And while people panicked, running through streets whose names they could no longer pronounce, the forgotten cities all reported the same final detail before communications went dead. A single shadow, tall and thin, walking the streets at night. Touching walls, leaving marks, and taking memories with it. The omen in the sky had been the beginning. The forgetting was the first step. I didn't believe the reports at first. No one did. Ash doesn't fall upward. Gravity doesn't reverse. The world doesn't just break its own rules. But that was before I saw it. Before the sky split open. Before the ancient thing behind it began to breathe. It started over the nameless cities, places already hollowed out by forgetting, where residents wandered with blank stares, unable to recall the homes they lived in or the streets beneath their feet. Then, late in the night, when the fog crawled low and the wind held its breath, people noticed something strange drifting through the streetlights. Ash. But not falling down. It rose. Silent, weightless, drifting upward like souls leaving bodies. Or like the world was slowly being turned upside down by invisible hands. And the ash wasn't gray. Not entirely. Up close, each speck shimmered with symbols. Tiny, moving marks, twisting and curling like ancient handwriting made of smoke. When the wind blew, the symbols changed shape. They formed patterns. Phrases. Warnings. Some people claimed they could read them. Just for a second. Before the symbols twisted into something that made their vision go black. One man recorded it. A scientist. Calm, rational, the type who believed everything had a measurable cause. In his final log, his voice shaking, he whispered. It's not ash. It's text. It's rewriting the world. And he wasn't wrong. As the ash rose, buildings trembled. Not collapsing, not falling apart. But pulling upward. Stretching. Warping. Like the city was being peeled from reality. Streetlights flickered in reverse, glowing brighter when powered off and dimming when switched on, as if the rules of the universe were being fed into a paper shredder. Animals sensed something first. Dogs howled at the sky. Birds flew downward. And insects crawled into the earth as if fleeing a burning home. But the people did not flee fast enough. The upward falling ash touched them. Settled on their skin. Their clothes. Their eyes. Some froze mid-step, staring upward as if hypnotized. Some began to speak in a language older than memory. Some simply vanished. Lifted gently into the rising ash cloud. As if they were being reclaimed by something that once owned them. I saw it happen. A woman walking across a silent street, whispering to herself. Ash brushed her arm. And she rose. Slowly. Peacefully. Like sleep pulling her upward. She never screamed. No one who touched the ash did. They simply drifted into the sky. And were taken. Into a shape forming above the clouds. A colossal outline, still half hidden, still unfolding. A shape with too many limbs. Too many eyes. Too many memories. The ash was not falling upward. It was returning to its master. And as the night deepened, and cities all around the world stood under a sky that no longer obeyed its own laws, the rising ash began to whisper together, forming one single message that vibrated inside every living skull. The world remembers its first god. And now, it wants us back. By the fourth night, no one wanted to go outside. The ash still drifted upward in silent ribbons, the sky still throbbed with that impossible pulse, and every city felt like a hollow shell waiting to break. But staying indoors didn't help. Because that's when the voices started. At first it was just vibrations. A faint trembling under the floorboards, subtle enough to blame on distant construction or heavy trucks that no longer existed. But the tremors grew. Steady. Rhythmic. Almost like breathing. People pressed their ears to their floors and swear they heard something. A soft, wet, dragging sound. Like something moving under the earth. And then the whispers came. They rose from beneath streets, sidewalks, subway tunnels, and cracked asphalt like steam rising from a dying world. The first recording came from a night security guard downtown. He thought someone had fallen into a maintenance shaft. He bent down, shone his flashlight through a gap in the pavement, and froze. When they found his phone the next morning, it was still recording. His voice was trembling. There are faces under the concrete. They're pressed against the underside, like they're trapped just beneath the surface. And they're talking? Oh God, they're talking to me. A long silence. Then the sound of nails scratching stone. Then dozens of whispers at once. Not speaking English. Not speaking any language known to this world. But communicating. Calling to him. Calling someone. The guard began sobbing. The recording ended with one final whisper that was in English. "We remember your footsteps." By sunrise, the cracks appeared. Long, thin fractures stretched across the asphalt of multiple cities. Like veins, like roots, like the skeletal fingers of something enormous pushing upward. The ground bulged. The concrete swelled. Manholes rattled violently as if something beneath them was banging to be let out. People reported hearing names whispered from below. Their names. Names spoken perfectly, with their own voice, as if something beneath the pavement was mimicking them. One child described it best. "Mommy, the ground is talking with my mouth." It only got worse. In some streets, the pavement sagged, sinking inches at a time, forming depressions shaped. Not randomly. But like gigantic footprints. Like something was pacing beneath the city, walking in slow, patient circles. Everywhere the footprint-shaped depressions appeared, the voices grew louder. Echoing up through the cracks like breath through broken bones. And late that night, something finally broke through. Not a creature. Not a hand. Not a face. A sound. A scream so deep and ancient it shook glass from windows and forced people to their knees. Not a scream of pain. Not a scream of rage. A scream of awakening. And as it echoed through the streets, the voices beneath the pavement fell silent all at once. Not because they were gone, but because they were listening. To something rising. From even deeper below. Something older than cities. Older than language. Older than gods that walked the earth before history was born. The ground is no longer solid. It is a lid. And something beneath it is starting to push. By the fifth night, sleep had become a dangerous thing. Not because of nightmares. But because the world had begun dreaming for us. The ash drifting upward had thickened into long, twisting ribbons. The cracks in the pavement pulsed like veins. And beneath the streets, the whispers no longer tried to hide. They were chanting. Low, rhythmic, ancient, like monks buried miles underground, praying in a tongue that tasted like dust and fire. That was the night I finally saw it. The first sign that the ancient god was not just stirring. It was waking up. It began with a sound. Not loud, but deep. A vibration that ran through the bones of the city, knocking picture frames from walls and sending every dog into a frantic howl. The ground trembled, then arched upward in a slow, unnatural rise. As though something enormous beneath it was stretching after a long, forgotten sleep. Manholes jumped. Sidewalks cracked open like eggshells. And the air grew thick enough to taste. Dry, metallic, and unbearably warm. Then came the heartbeat. A single boom, heavy enough to rattle the air. Then another. Faster. Stronger. Every light in the city flickered in the same rhythm. On. Off. On. Off. Sinking with something massive and alive beneath the ground. A woman screamed in the street. Not because of what she saw, but because of what she felt. She dropped to her knees, clutching her chest as if someone else's heartbeat was pounding inside her body. People everywhere collapsed. Some sobbing. Some gasping. Some whispering in voices not their own. Then the pavement bulged, rippling outward like the surface of a drum. A long crack split the road open. And a sound crawled out of it. Not a whisper this time. Not a chant. A drawing of breath. A long, slow inhale. That pulled dust, ash, leaves, and even loose stones into the fissure. As if the earth itself was exhaling after thousands of years of being silent. At that exact moment, something else happened. Every person in the city, every man, woman, child, heard a voice inside their head. Not a scream. Not a whisper. A memory. A memory that wasn't ours. A memory of something older than time, older than light, older than the world itself. And in that shared vision, we saw it. A colossal silhouette sleeping beneath the crust of the earth. Limbs longer than rivers. A spine like a breaking horizon. Eyes that had not opened since human history began. Eyes that were opening now. Slowly. Painfully. Purposefully. The heartbeat grew louder. The breath grew deeper. The ground swelled as if a giant was pushing upward through soil, bedrock, and civilization without effort. And then the voice came. Echoing through the air. Vibrating through the pavement. Spoken through the mouth of every living creature at once. I rise. Streetlights burst. Windows shattered. Birds fell from the sky mid-flight. And in the center of the glowing crack, a single enormous finger. Not flesh, not bone, not anything human. Pressed against the underside of the earth. Like someone testing the strength of a coffin, the ancient god had taken its first breath, and the world would never sleep again. By the sixth night, the world was no longer recognizable. The ash still rose in impossible spirals. The cracks in the pavement had widened into glowing fissures, and the heartbeat beneath the earth pulsed like the rhythm of some ancient, sleeping beast. But it wasn't just the earth that had begun to move. It was the children. At first, it was a whisper on the wind, a faint hum drifting through nameless streets and empty houses. Then, as the night deepened, voices joined together. Soft, melodic, eerie, singing words no one could understand. The children were chanting. Across the world. In every city touched by the ash. From small towns in Europe to abandoned streets in the Americas. Voices that were not their own, singing in unison, in a language older than memory, older than history. Parents tried to stop them. Teachers screamed. Scientists scrambled to record and analyze the phenomenon. But it was too late. The children could not stop themselves. They were possessed, or called, or chosen. Something had entered them. Something that spoke through their mouths and moved through their minds, with perfect, terrifying harmony. It started as a single phrase repeated over and over. When translated, or what passed for translation in the panic-stricken moments, it was only 3 words. They are risen. The tone was not threatening. It was celebratory, joyful, and yet it chilled the blood more than screams ever could. And then, the ash began to stir. It lifted higher than ever before, swirling into the shapes of enormous wings. Or perhaps they were crowns. Or perhaps, the shadows of the ancient gods themselves, brushing close to the mortal world. People watching from a distance said the air vibrated with invisible resonance. Their teeth hummed. Their stomachs churned. Their hearts raced to keep up with something immense and alien. The children, hundreds, thousands, continued chanting. Their bodies swayed in time with the heartbeat beneath the ground. Their eyes glowed faintly, like embers caught in the night. No one could approach without feeling pulled, compelled. Like the music of something dead and powerful was bending reality itself. And then, the unthinkable happened. The largest fissure in the city's pavement cracked fully open. A shape began to rise, a shadow stretching from the earth, a silhouette too large to comprehend, still half submerged in glowing red light. The chanting stopped for a single heartbeat. And then, together, the children spoke the words that froze the entire city. We serve the ash gods. The wind died. The ash froze midair. And all over the world, every child in every affected city looked upward in unison. Toward the rising shape. Toward the first true glimpse of the ancient god returning. The choir of the ash children had begun. And humanity would never sing again. By the 7th night, it was no longer just whispers or strange phenomena. The world had begun to bend, to tremble, to obey something older than cities, older than empires, older than humanity itself. And then they came. The fissures in the earth widened like gaping mouths. Concrete and asphalt cracked and lifted, dust and debris swirling in silent spirals. And from those yawning gaps, shadows began to rise. Massive, towering forms, too large to be human, too old to be measured, ash gods. Their bodies were made of black smoke, jagged bone, and glowing red cracks, stretching impossibly high. Limbs longer than rivers, heads like shattered mountains, and eyes that held the weight of thousands of forgotten centuries. They didn't roar. They didn't move quickly. They simply stood, each one casting a shadow that swallowed entire city blocks. And then the wind began to scream. Not a normal wind. A wind carrying whispers older than the earth itself, a language that humans could not process. A resonance that vibrated through bones, teeth, and minds. The air itself seemed to thicken. Ash swirled into tornado-like spirals around their feet, lifting cars, debris, and terrified people into the storm. Children from the choir, the ash-touched ones, raised their voices in unison. Their chanting merged with the vibration of the earth, creating a harmony that made reality itself shiver. The ash gods moved. Slowly, purposely. Each step bending the streets, flattening buildings, cracking glass in a symphony of destruction. Their shadows stretched longer than highways, darker than night, and cold enough to freeze the marrow. And then one reached out a hand. Not toward a city. Not toward a person. Toward the sky. And the sky cracked like thin ice. A sound like bones snapping echoed across continents. The world realized then the truth. This was not an attack. This was a homecoming. The ash gods had returned. Not for vengeance. Not for worship. Not for death. But to reclaim a world that had been theirs long before humans ever walked the earth. And every living creature felt it. The trembling of the soil. The pull in the air. The undeniable understanding that no one could escape. Because nothing alive could outrun what was older than life itself. The ash gods had emerged. And the world, silent and trembling, had no choice but to look up. By the 8th night, the world had begun to understand a terrible truth. This was not a warning. It was an execution of reality itself. The ash gods had fully emerged. Massive forms of shadow, bone, and ash moved across the cities, walking like living mountains. Every step they took sent tremors through the earth, cracking streets, shattering windows, and bending the laws of physics as if the world itself feared them. The wind carried whispers, not from the children this time, but from the very air. A low, resonant chorus vibrating through every living thing. The world is ours. You will obey. And then the silence came. It wasn't gradual. It wasn't polite. It was instant. Every human voice cut out at once. Screams died midair. Cars stopped running. Radios froze. Even electronic devices flickered and went dark. People tried to speak. Their mouths moved. Their lips formed words. But no sound emerged. Only silence. Cities that had once been filled with life now lay under the oppressive weight of ash, shadows, and unanswered whispers. Those who tried to flee found the streets reshaped. Buildings bent into impossible forms. Alleys led nowhere. Bridges twisted into loops that defied reason. The choir of the ash children appeared again. Their voices rose, floating through the dead silence, repeating one phrase over and over. All that remembers will be claimed. From above, the ash gods watched. They did not move quickly. They did not chase. They simply loomed, and the world obeyed. People realized that night that survival was no longer about running. It was about hiding from perception itself. Because the ash gods didn't just walk the earth, they reshaped it with awareness. They could see everything. And they could reach into the mind. By midnight, entire continents were quiet. The living had been silenced. Those who remained conscious felt only the oppressive weight of observation. The knowledge that at any moment, one glance upward could be the last thing they ever saw. And somewhere, in the distance, the final broadcast began. A lone voice crackling over static, trembling with terror, speaking words that no one else could answer. If you hear me, do not look up, they are awake, and they are patient. And then, for the first time, humanity collectively understood. The night had fallen. Not darkness. Not death. But silence. The ash gods were no longer emerging. They were everywhere. And the world had stopped screaming. By the 9th night, the world had gone utterly silent. No voices. No engines. No birds. Just the ash swirling upward in a sky streaked with blood-red cracks, and the looming shadows of the ash gods towering over broken cities. In the midst of the chaos, a lone survivor reached a dead radio tower. The wind ripped at their clothes, ash seared their lungs, and the earth trembled beneath each step. Every city they passed was a graveyard of frozen terror, streets twisted, buildings bent into impossible angles, shadows stretching like living creatures across the pavement. With trembling hands, they powered on the ancient transmitter. The hum of static filled the empty air, louder than the heartbeat of the earth itself. And then, they spoke. This is the final transmission, if anyone is listening. They are awake. The world as you knew it is gone. The ash gods walk among us. The children, the choir, they serve them. And I am the last voice, before the silence becomes complete. Static crackled. Red lightning arced across the sky. The sound of ash hitting the earth became deafening. Every living thing felt the pull of something immense beneath the crust of the world, something ancient, eternal, unstoppable. Do not look at the sky. Do not call their names. They remember everything, every sin, every fear, every whisper of your soul. They are patient, and they are hungry. The survivor's voice trembled, breaking with terror, but the message was clear. No one would survive the night. No one would return. The world belongs to them now. And then the radio fell silent. No crackle. No static. Only the wind, and the slow, methodical pulse of the ash gods as they walked through a world emptied of sound, reshaped by ash, shadow, and memory. Somewhere, far below, the earth itself seemed to sigh. A low, resonant sound like the breath of the first god, echoing through the continents. The final transmission had been sent. The last warning had been delivered. And humanity had finally learned the meaning of silence. The ash gods had fully awakened. The night was eternal. And the world would never speak again.